And we are slightly moving into the second part of the panel discussion, and this time you will hear the story of an Irish space tech startup, Celtonn, represented by its co-founder, Aoife Kelly. So Aoife, please join me on the stage. So round of applause for Aoife. And her startup perspective will be complemented by the perspective of an investor, Simon Drake, from Space Ventures Investors, will join me on the stage as well. This is your chair and your microphone, so please sit down and enjoy. So, the traditional question for the beginning. So, Aoife, could you please pitch your company? What's actually about? What's the space in Celtonn?
Yes, so I suppose to give a little bit of context, I think there's around 12,000 satellites currently in orbit. I know we have an ESA representative here, so she might be able to give me those proper figures. But yeah, by the time 2030 comes, we're anticipating 100,000 satellites. So that's such a massive growth, which is terrific. But the thing with a lot of the components within the satellites, they're operating at a frequency called Ka band. And Ka band works amazingly, but with 100,000 satellites, it's going to become congested. So that means that data can't be transmitted as quickly. And that's where my company, Celtonn, come in. We design and manufacture higher frequency components in W band and V band. And this gives broader bandwidth, faster data transmission, so it's less congested. And also this frequency is less susceptible to cybersecurity or world security attacks as well. SpaceX, I know was mentioned already, but they're moving towards the V-band frequency. So that's really where the market's going. And we are kind of at the forefront of being able to manufacture. We have a full product line ready. So that's a little bit about us.
So 6G communications
will 6G.
Be enabled by your solution.
Yeah, so the higher frequency will enable 6G essentially because it's faster data transmission.
And what are the applications you see for 6G? What's the primary sector in?
So I suppose in terms of satellite communications and the higher frequency transmission, it's just kind of like the applications in terms of Earth observation. You have resilience, European resilience in terms of anticipating floods, like the point of the Moo or the Moo company. Earth observation, ground to satellite communications, and obviously our technology, if the form factor is smaller, it can be used on mobile phone devices as well.
Okay, and Simon, more than 10 years ago, you actually started the Space Ventures Investors. So could you introduce your activity in this field?
So the reason we started Space Ventures Investors is we could see a gap in the market where people wanted to invest in space, but it was such a technically difficult field, high cost for new companies, very complex business models. So we started a company focused on making a retail-focused company. We raised capital and then directed that capital at pre-seed stage and early stage space startups. And that enabled us to, it gave us a reason to follow the rising space industry, then work out where to allocate capital, and then work out where not to allocate capital as well. Now from this company, we're forming another company called European Space Ventures based in Frankfurt, which is more of a PLC, which that goal is to raise our profile for investors so that we can get more European retail investors and high net worth investors into our company so that we can get capital and then reinvest that back in European space companies. And this is our mantra of why we exist. If you have a broking account on your phone, you can invest in an ETF, like a space ETF, but that money that goes into an ETF is probably going to go to a basket of space stocks. Probably 90% of them are based in the US. That money is just going to go and buying shares in space stocks, which really doesn't help European investors and innovators. So that's what we do. And we focus on always finding better ways of promoting European space investing. Half of my job is investor education, and that's why I'm here.
Great. And actually, what's driving investors' interest in space tech right now? Are there any like space resources, mining, etc.?
Yeah, it's a real tricky one. So on one side you have what the media present, and on the other you have the reality. And in the middle, you've got the investor trying to work out what to invest in. And in terms of investing products, there's not that many investing products for a space investor. For European space investors, there's very, very few products. So we all have an idea of, you might wake up one day and say, oh, I want to invest in space mining. But it's actually very technically difficult to do that. You can wake up tomorrow and say you want to invest in gold mining companies, and I can give you a list of 20 gold mining companies which you can buy shares in. There is no space mining company. One of our joint ventures is a lunar resources company, and we look at ways of how we make this company more approachable to retail investors. And then you're looking at European regulation about how you get investors on board. So imagine going to a European regulator and say, yeah, I have a moon mining company. They're just going to, you're going to be at the bottom of their list of applications. But what drives European investment, I think now, is the recent geopolitical change where all of a sudden Europe had to understand that it was on its own from a supply chain point of view. And it couldn't always rely on the US as a big brother. You couldn't always rely on European superiority in technology because now China's come up to speed. So I think what's important for European mindset of space investing, and this has happened in the last year, is Europe really, I find people are more understanding than me that Europe really need to get its act together and invest in more homegrown things. What Aoife was talking about was, their components kind of give more sovereignty to based on their components. And this is what's coming along. You want to have space tech companies that don't rely on the US, don't rely on China. And that enforces European space sovereignty.
If you will.
So there's the European Chips Act that's been released, and it's encouraging EU non-dependence on the US and China. And in a lot of the grant opportunities, they promote a European supply chain as well for space tech companies. So that's obviously great to have in Europe.
Speaking about grant opportunities, actually, what support did you get along the way from the early startup phase to the scaling up phase, Aoife?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if the audience is made up of people that are looking to start businesses or if it's investors, but we're a company that's 3 years old. Mm-hmm. So we have just graduated from VIC, and I would really definitely encourage anyone with an idea, really, or a startup to explore the opportunity of VIC because the member states provide the network. It's around 50,000 euros. I don't want to put a number on it, but it's around that much funding. And it's not just the cash injection that's helpful. It's also access to the network of mentors, supports. And it's companies that you don't have to be manufacturing chips like us. You can be herding cattle, or you can be a sports technology company that's using GPS. I know in Ireland there is... I know some people think that these scooters in the city centre are really annoying, but one of those companies called Moby in Ireland is on VIC because they obviously utilise GPS for the scooters around the city. So if you are a startup and you have an idea, I would definitely explore that option because we find it very beneficial. And yeah, I know ISA actually is one of our customers. So we're currently doing 2 projects with ISA. But it is correct that you don't want to be reliant on just ISA money because there isn't profit in it, where you want to commercialize your products. And in terms of Ireland, we have something called Enterprise Ireland. So in the Czech Republic, I'm sure there's similar government agencies that can support you if you have a startup or if you're early stage. And then, of course, you can think about making the decision to go down the investment route, or you can try and bootstrap like us and concentrate on sales more. But yeah, there's lots of support out there. I would definitely recommend that everyone goes through their LinkedIn and like follow all the pages, because there's so many grant opportunities in Europe, like feasibility studies, different programs for female-founded companies, for deep technology. Yeah, there's loads and loads of grant opportunities, so definitely follow all the accounts on LinkedIn.
Yeah, thank you for addressing the support of European Space Agency Business Incubation Center. That's the abbreviation for ESABIC. Actually, in Czech Republic, we have 2 branches, one in Prague, one in Brno, so there's definitely support. One of my colleagues, actually, Veronica, is sitting in the first row, so you can just meet her during the networking and ask about the support which is provided by this facility. However, you also got some funding from European Commission, right, from the Ambition EIC program?
We haven't got funding from the EIC yet, but we got accepted onto a USB Space Business Accelerator, and that's a 6-month program that's run by the European Commission, and it's for space technology companies like that. You do the 6 months and you do different modules, you meet with different high-profile mentors. It's been really beneficial to us in terms of getting investor ready as well, and you also get 75k once you've completed the program as well.
Mm-hmm. Simon, we know that investment in tech companies can be risky, and investment in space tech companies is even riskier. So what would you recommend to startups to make themselves more investment ready in this space environment?
I don't want to sound biased, but so when we look at pitches that come to us, we kind of now focus more on Europe, and we try and look at companies, startups that have been through the European Space Agency business incubation process. I had a company that went through that process, so I understand how much effort you have to put into to actually be part of an ESABIC, and how much effort you have to put into to get out of it without going crazy. So that is what I would call a filtering process, where if someone has been able to go through that and come out with and move their product or concept of a service up a TLR from 0 or 1 to 2 or 3 or 4, then that's a sure sign that they have been able to integrate themselves into an ESA process. ESA pretty much does the filtering of the business model, not always, where they can say, well, this person's idea for a space tech application obviously has merit and it fits in somewhere. On top of that, and to the side from a business point of view, I try and look at it and say, well, how does this work now, and how does it work in 5 years? Because a lot of the ideas that are coming along were good 5 years ago, but aren't any good now. And that's just the nature of a lot of young founders. We've all been there. You have an idea, you think you're, God's gift to engineering or whatever, but you're just too late, So, and it takes a few cycles of the, as an inventor, before you realise, before you develop a discipline and say, oh, look, that idea was good back then, this idea is something really unique. The unique ideas you're always going to get criticism for, because unique ideas, that's the role of a unique idea. No one's going to really like it at first. So from a business point of view, I try and work out where it fits in what we call the strategic space value chain. So the example from Aoife was a really good one, where it's a component that it fits in something so specific, and it fits in a particular range. And this is where the innovation happens. The innovation doesn't happen by saying, oh, I'm going to make a new rocket or something. The innovation happens by improving on a system that already exists and improving it to the next step and the next step and the next step. So the real innovation happens on the fringe. And the goal is to be part of that and develop something unique that has a proper practical outcome.
Great. Let's check the questions in the event application in Space Tech Rising, which is the name of the second part of the panel discussion. And maybe, Simon, I guess that you can answer the question, how can European startups compete with US and Asian players?
We talked about this earlier, that I wouldn't get political.
No, it's not about politics, of course.
So on the one hand, the US has a very efficient system at arranging capital to space tech startups. On the other side, if you speak of Asia and you speak of China, it's pretty much if you can have an idea and you fit into the power structure that is China, then you can get, further up the ladder. I think for Europe, it's a mindset of investing where European investors, as far as I know, I'm based in Germany, is very conservative. And I think that has to slowly change, where more conservative investors who have experience, who've done, blue chip deals before, they have a stable income. I think it's up to them to really realise that they play a pivotal role in funding new European space startups. And why I go on about this is because, in the last 10 years, I've seen, well, let's say 20 years, 25 years, I've seen .com, bio, tech boom, AI, that's coming along, crypto. I've seen all these things come and go. And all the while, I'm thinking of space investing in Europe, and I meet so many founders in Europe who are like, yeah, they've got a great idea, but they just can't get capital. And not everyone can go to the US to access that capital. So I think how European startups compete is Europe changes its mindset about what it means to invest in a space startup. And I think we might be on the way there because the geopolitical situation has changed. Europe suddenly realised we can't always rely on the US. Europe cannot rely on Starlink forever. So I think the change is starting to happen. It's just a matter of, for investors who are more mainstream, to understand that they've already been investing in risky things anyway. Investing in a risky space startup, just add it to the stack of things they invest in.
I've also seen another question regarding the investment, because downstairs was said that one of the European weaknesses is investment or money fragmentation. So how do you see it from your perspective? Is it really true that the investment system in Europe is fragmented?
Can you repeat the question?
It's the second question from the top. So, weakness of Europe? You can see it's now highlighted so in the system.
I have to process it. Okay, downstairs. Okay, fragmentation is a really good way to describe it, where if you think of a space investment and you think of going to your local bank manager and saying that you want to do something completely amazing, and your local bank manager will just say, I just do loans for houses, It's so when you look at the fragmentation that's, I think, required of the European investing world, is they have to get more willing to fund space startups and even SMEs. Previously, Europe goes through lots of phases. We've had different phases. The rise of the solar wind farms, the rise of the wind turbines as green investments. I think space is going to come along where it's more, it becomes a bit more mainstream. And this is what's required in order to stop this fragmentation. The existing fragmentation or previous fragmentation was, if you talk about a space investment, it's out there on the risk curve along with an alternative investment or something speculative. It needs to come back in and say, no, this is a technology that we need in order to have a properly functioning sovereign European industrial base.
I suppose my 2 cents on the entrepreneurial spirit in America and Europe is definitely different. So I'm not sure if it's your experience that in America, you'll get a big check written for you, even if you just have an idea. And you could be like a 19, 20-year-old on the golf course, and your mom's best friend writes you this check to give it a go. So you give the business a go, and obviously it fails. You're 20 years old, but you've built up that skill set. And then when it comes to doing it again, when you're 35, you're good to go because you've built the skills. And I think in Europe, we're definitely more conservative with money in terms of like investors. Like, would they be less risky? Like, would you see that from the difference from America to Europe?
Yes, but I think now that it's also a perception where I think a few years ago, I was pitching a space investing concept, and someone said, why would I invest in a European space company? The Americans will just do it. I don't think that's valid anymore. And now I think what's even more valid is the Europeans should be investing in more space tech innovative companies because they're investing in their children's future. And if they don't do it, then the space market is just going to be eaten by existing US companies and Chinese and Indian companies who are going to do it. So I think it's now a do or die situation where there's no point saying, oh, I wouldn't invest in that, it's too risky. My feeling is, look, the financial industry is full of risks. Like, there's risk everywhere. There is no risk-free thing except for a few monetary metals or one monetary metal. So I think the kind of mentality has to change, and it's my part of my job being an investor educator is to give people a momentum for change or a pivotal point to change. And now I think it's really about Europe has to change its investing mentality, not to be like the US or try and emulate the success of the US, but because Europe should be investing in its future, and that means investing in the next generation. And the next generation, I'm 50 years old. I've met a lot of people. I've always heard complaints about different generations. This generation, that. Blah blah blah. When I meet the younger space generation, they're completely optimistic, completely switched on, and completely ready for the challenge. So, as I see it, it's a great place to invest.
And great to invest in the new generation. Thank you for mentioning this. If I've seen also one question targeting Celtonn, and I cannot see it. So.
From Jan, does Celtonn manufacture in Europe, and what are some important aspects of manufacturing such products? Yeah, so we're actually based in University College Dublin, and we hire a lab there. So our IP is our own. We haven't spun out. We've spun in, essentially. And we hire University College Dublin graduates. They've got an excellent space program. So universities are definitely really important for the entrepreneurial ecosystem. But we're in the lucky position that we have all our equipment, and we have good connections in the different universities that have some of the higher spec equipment. Our engineers can also use this equipment, and we get our chips fabricated, obviously in the big fabrication facilities like Maycom or Taiwan, but we assemble everything ourselves, and then we've got European third parties that, for example, like the precision engineering or the gold plating. But yeah, we manufacture in Ireland.
Great, and there was also another question, if space was primary target for Celtonn when it was founded, or is it simply a market which would use the technology you are developing?
There's a few different applications. So there's applications for satellites, like I mentioned, but then there's also radar defense applications as well. But yeah, we are primarily focused on the space industry and the aerospace industry. We are currently piloting with one of the large OEMs, and they're using our W-band chips within their airplane for faster communications, airplane to airplane. Obviously, that's confidential, but it's even a little bit confidential for us who are doing the project. So they haven't told us the exact application, but it might be defense application. It's a large company, but yeah, we've just provided them the technology.
When talking about the defense and dual-use technologies, Simon, I can see your face, but I will ask anyway. So what about investors? Are they ready to invest in dual-use technologies?
So dual-use technologies in defense, there's already a mindset in investors who say they don't want to have anything to do with weapons. So that predates this conversation. My feeling is that whether you like it or not, is going to happen. And although there's laws in places and there's politics involved, I think defense really means offense. And this is an argument that is, goes back thousands of years. Like, you just can't have space defense without having the ability to project power. So I haven't seen myself a startup pitching, something in that area. But I can guarantee that the big prime contractors will be getting those deals to make that kind of technology in order to project power. And it might be something as simple of the ability to, to intercept hypersonic missiles, whatever. It does open a whole new market, and it is quite interesting to see how that plays out. But at the same time, you have to really try and work out, well, what is defence? Are we talking like, who's your enemy? Who are you trying to protect against? So that's still yet to unfold.
Okay, and I've seen also one question which you can answer as well. So what area of space technology currently offers the highest potential for new startups to emerge? Is the first one, the first row?
That's a really tricky question because I think we're going through a pivotal moment where we've had a wave of innovation. So as an easy example, anyone who in the room who pays tax has supported the Sentinel satellites, which have data that comes down. It's for free. It's great service. But basing a business model exclusively on free Sentinel data was good a few years ago because not many people are doing it. Now it's quite accessible. Unless you're very specific, it's hard to really carve yourself out a niche. So highest potential requires that you have a niche and leverage in a field which is very hard for someone else to get into. So as I said earlier, we're at a pivotal point. What comes next, I'm not completely sure. I'm trying to work that one out myself because it's time for things are always in flux and always changing. So there's a couple of ways to look at it. One is the Celtonn way, which is build something that's required from a very technical and precise point of view. The other way is looking at it and saying, well, what are themes, which a previous guest talked about was space, I think safety. So one area could be something like space debris, like what do you make to combat space debris? So that could be a high potential because at some point there might be a space debris problem. If you're a startup working on space debris solutions or mitigation or strategic intelligence, you might suddenly become, in demand. So highest potential can also equal, from an investing point of view, you might have a great idea and you see the potential, but you just might be too early for that potential to be realised. As an investor, you can be right but early and therefore wrong. So I don't know the exact answer to that question, but part of my job is to solve it.
Aoife, what's in the vision of your company actually? You mentioned that Celtonn is in the market for 3 years. So are you seeking for an investment or what was actually the strategy overall?
Yeah, so I suppose with investment, it's suitable for some companies and it isn't for others. And it is a really big decision. It's a full-time job for one person recruiting an investor and getting your data room ready and then keeping them updated, and it's a full-time job for sure. So would that time be better spent on commercial sales if you're a very small team? You just have to analyze that yourself as a business. Right now we're in the position that our cash flow is strong, so we'll probably be seeking our first initial investment round in 24 months, but it could take 24 months to find the right value add investor. And I think that's really important. You want an investor that's going to open doors for you, that understands your business model. It's kind of like they say, it's like going into a marriage. Your investor is going to be part of the business. You're going to be meeting with them all the time for years, and they'll have they can make decisions with your company and change the direction. That's some feedback that some startups say. So it's definitely, it's a decision that you have to think of wisely. But yeah, we'll be looking to find the value add investor in 24 months.
Simon, looks like you would like to react on the value the investor can add to a startup.
You mean the investor impact on a startup, or
differs from your expertise, maybe?
Yeah, it's a big challenge. So I think it comes back to what the investor wants and what kind of investor they are and what understanding they have of what they're doing. So if it's a technology investor and they're getting into space and they're getting into components, they probably have 20 years history of doing components before they even got into space. So in that case, you're dealing with an experienced investor who obviously know the supply chain backing that market up. If it's a more speculative investor, then you could have a rocky marriage, because a speculative investor might have a very speculative mindset, but when they get together, as with any startup, a new business, it can go through many iterations. It has one concept at the very beginning. 5 years later, it's doing something completely different. And that would strain the relationship between the founders and the investor or investors. So I don't have the perfect way to go about it, but I think it is important to always know what the investor really wants and what's driving them. But at the same time, a lot of startups need a speculative investor to get their lucky break, and that's just reality.
Would you be looking for 10x on your investment?
I'm still waiting for that.
But is that the sort of ambition that you as an investment fund would look for?
Yes. So, I mean, I have a feeling that the previous venture capital mindset, which was throwing darts at 50 startups and hoping one becomes a unicorn, that was great when a part of everyone's pension fund was directed to funds that had a small percentage that went to venture capital funds. So the venture capital had a lot of money to play with and make a lot of bets. I don't know if that system is going to survive what's coming down the road in terms of how financial systems evolve, what's going on at the moment. And so how I look at it is from a small business point of view, is I don't want a startup to die, because that's like, it's just the last thing you want, because you lose money and you lose time. Time is more important than money sometimes. So the goal is I think now is startups should survive and flourish and get a great valuation going forward. And because they're space startups, the time is just such longer than other, like a software as a service company for kids in a garage, programming something, make an app, it goes ballistic, they get some unicorn valuation. That can happen with a software-based startup. But if you're making a piece of hardware that has to get integrated into a multinational space project, that's going to take years and years of testing. So the expectation for a space startup to have this like massive return, I think, is very kind of wishy-washy. I think the best expectation is that to have a space startup that integrates itself into a larger, space system. And yes, it can get bought out at a later stage, but at first it's got to add value. And second, it's got to find a market and grow. So my expectation is not 10 times, even though it'd be good to get that. In investing, having a 10 bagger is possible, but it can't happen all the time. So I think how we're going forward now, it's more about having a sustainable investment that grows and just grows in value and becomes a really well-functioning company.
We are out of time. However, I will ask my last question, and I call it message in the bottle. And it should be one piece of advice you would give to an entrepreneur here in the room who's thinking about entering the space industry. So what would you advise to this entrepreneur?
Yeah, so you don't have to be technical. There's lots of opportunities in the space industry. I'm not technical. My background is marketing. And there's lots of space startups that need someone like their chief of marketing who's looking to get involved in a startup, all hands on deck. The pay isn't great in startups, but you're in it for the long haul. You're in it for your equity and hopefully your acquisition. So you can definitely go into the space industry without being technical. And like just the Nike thing of just do it. Yeah, if you're interested in business, just go for it.
I think rule number 1, don't run out of money. Rule number 2 is remember rule number 1.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and experience from building a space tech startup and investing in space tech startups. So round of applause for Aoife and Simon. Thank you.